Welcome back to the Dallas 2017 Pokemon Regional Championships. My name is Gabby Snyder.
You are joined by Adam Dorricott. It would help if TJ actually turned my microphone on. Left mine muted for now. There we go. That's a little bit better. We now have both the mics live.
Are you still Adam Dorricott, though?
This time I am. There's no tomfoolery in my surname this time around. That was just in my home state of Florida. But for today, I can guarantee my name is staying the same.
All right, so we're here finally with Round 8. I know you guys have been waiting a while, so thank you very much for your patience. I think we've picked a good one for you, though.
Oh, we definitely have. We've got Trista Medine versus Jake Muller. So we've moved away from the games we streamed earlier today have all been X and O throughout the course of the day, obviously trying to bring you those top-level matches. But now crunch time approaches. And what happens here is, of course, players know what the cut is. They know it's top 16, and they can figure out pretty much how a cut works. So if you're X and O, you're obviously in. If you're X and 1, you're also in. But then it comes to the tricky point where if you're X and 2 in this regional, at least 7 and 2, you need a really good resistance. You need to have a good strength of schedule. So the current records our player has, we have Jake Muller, who is on X and 2. So he has 2 losses already. For him, he needs to win this game. If he loses this game, he's out. He won't be participating in Top Cut tomorrow. He's actually paired up against Trista, who is X and 1 though. Trista being at X and 1, getting the pair down means her resistance isn't so hot right now. Obviously her loss, not to a player who's flourished throughout the rest of the tournament. So this for her, she also really needs to win it, because if she does lose, then she will go to X and 2. And even if she wins her final round, what could happen is her resistance just won't be strong enough to bring her up into that top cut, and she'll miss out, which will be really unfortunate because she is a fantastic player. Jake obviously had a bit of rocky start to the day, I think. I don't know where his losses came in the day, but he really wants to win this and show that if he can sneak into cut, I think he can go really far in there.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot on the line, and these players, I think, are really feeling it. You know, we've been here for such a long time. It is getting late. It's almost New Year's, apparently, which just is unbelievable for me to comprehend right now.
It's actually New Year's in my motherland. My friends have all informed me it's 2017, and it's a similar kind of year. It's not much has changed yet.
Oh, darn. I was hoping that we'd get some cool stuff in the new year, but hey, we're still waiting for it here. But, you know, fatigue is really, I think, something that these trainers need to keep in mind as they move forward into this match. It's very easy to sort of let your eyes glaze over a little bit, maybe not think as much about the plays that you're clicking in, but when your entire tournament experience is on the line, you cannot afford to just let that go.
It's definitely a part of the game we play. Obviously, winning your games is important, but there is an endurance element to it too. I think players who manage to go the distance, really, to quote Hercules, can win out that way. It's just like some players are really up for it, especially when you're winning and feeling good. It's easy to keep playing, and those kind of players whose motivation goes down a little bit when they drop a couple of matches, they're getting tired, it really sets in, and I think both these players are going to have to fight that along with each other in this battle.
Yeah, so while we're waiting for them to get started, I think we'll be switching to team preview momentarily. Let's give you a little sneak peek at what these trainers are running. So Jake Muller is running Tapu Koko, Araquanid, Muck, Kartana, Porygon 2, and Salamence versus Trista's team of Salamence, Gigalith, Alolan Marowak, Celesteela, Porygon 2, and Tapu Lele.
Well, I really like a couple of things. We haven't seen much Muck today. I think we've seen it on stream once, so it's not been ideal. But I think it could do quite well against Trista's team. Of course, Tapu Koko struggles to deal with Alolan Marowak with that Lightning Rod ability, Muck being a fantastic answer to that. So there's a couple of good answers to the Alolan Marowak in the Araquanid and the Muck, and that's going to help keep the Tapu Koko and the Kartana a little bit easier time doing what they need to do, which is putting out some really good damage.
Yeah, and looking at both these teams, it almost feels like, to me, we're seeing sort of the beginning of the 2017 metagame versus sort of like where we are right now, if you will. Jake's team of that Tapu Koko, the Muck, the Porygon 2, the Kartana, the Araquanid, I feel like these are all Pokemon we've seen sort of flourish in the past couple tournaments. Whereas Trista, you know, she's running something that reminds me a lot of what we saw on the Battle Spot ladder, you know, before these tournaments happen. So, you know, if I if I had to make a guess by that, she's probably been running this team for a while. She's probably very comfortable with it. I know that the New York area where she's from has had a few premier challenges prior to this tournament.
Very competitive ones,
it's a very competitive area in New York. Like, I don't know how they manage with all those people entering those premier challenges. They certainly produce some of the best trainers. But this is definitely a team she's most likely comfortable with. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if she's seen a matchup like Jake's before and she knows how to handle it going straight into this game one.
Yeah, she definitely does. But looking at her team sheet, I think there's definitely a Trista spin. The Pokemon may be the same, but some of the movesets and some of the ideas behind them definitely a little bit different. So it'll be interesting to see if she's adapted from that early metagame and just added a spin without changing the Pokemon.
So, interestingly enough, both of these trainers have decided to lead these same Pokemon. We see that Salamence and Porygon 2 combo on both sides of the field. Both Salamences revealing they have Intimidate, but Trista's Salamence did move first. And Jake Salamence did move first, and Trista's Porygon 2 got the download first. So it's hard to determine whether or not that was due to just how the Pokemon chose to move, maybe due to some speed ties, maybe due to how they're trained, but that information will certainly be valuable going into this first turn.
It definitely will, and that's something they're going to have to make an educated guess on. If somebody knows that they're at full speed and they went second, well, then it's a speed tie, and that kind of information is really important. Interesting matchup though, of course. Porygons, some carry Ice Beam, some don't, and if one of the two of them has got Ice Beam and the other one doesn't, then they could end up just getting an easy knockout on Salamence. But Jake, very scared of something like that happening to him, making a switch right off the bat.
We see that Salamence switch out for the Araquanid. We see Salamence switch out on Trista's side of the field as well for a Celesteela. So it's all down to these Porygons. We see Porygon 2 reveal Ice Beam on Trista's side of the field, targeting that Araquanid, not going to deal any damage. No freeze, and Porygon 2 on Jake's side of the field, also with the Ice Beam into Celesteela, and again, no freeze.
No, both players, similar idea obviously with identical leads, and then a switch on the Salamence and an Ice Beam from the Porygon. So both players very wise to get their Salamence out of danger. And the main thing to discuss here is what comes in for both of them. Jake obviously bringing in the Araquanid, going to bring a lot of offensive pressure with that. That's something that we've seen doing a lot of damage to Celesteela, to Porygon, and that's going to be really good if he wants to build momentum like that. Trista, on the other hand, making a switch to Celesteela, definitely a slightly slower play that she might want to set up a little bit so she can work like that.
We see Trista switch out her Porygon 2, sending in the Salamence in its place, intimidating both that Araquanid and that Porygon 2. Araquanid protecting this turn on Jake's side of the field. Celesteela with Toxic into the Porygon 2. An amazing play there. That Toxic will certainly hurt Porygon 2's ability to sort of stall out this match if it were to go long. But Porygon 2 on Jake's side of the field, revealing that it has in and out. Revealing that it has Thunderbolt, excuse me.
We have just had a food delivery, haven't we?
We might have just had our food delivered, finally.
Anyway, Porygon 2 showing the Thunderbolt, getting some damage down on the Celesteela, but we see a move that isn't often picked on the Celesteela. In this instance, it's the Toxic. So Trista obviously giving up that standard set on Celesteela and getting a very effective Toxic down on the Porygon 2. So that's going to be something that will wear it down nice and quick. And while Porygon usually likes to stay on the field, it's now going to be forced into some recovers to try and make sure it doesn't get caught by that.
Yes, so we are going to see that Salamence switch out. Porygon 2 take the field in its place, appearing once again. That download ability is going to boost its attack stat. So unfortunately for Porygon, that might have not been what it was looking for. Celesteela falling asleep on the field, using its own rest to become healthy. I don't think I've seen that at all, and it looks like Celesteela is holding Lumberry. So a rest Lumberry, Celesteela from Trista, taking another Thunderbolt from that Porygon 2. Unfortunately, it is paralyzed this time, but it can always rest possibly to get that health and status back. We see that Liquidation target the Celesteela as well.
No, Jake obviously wanting to get rid of that Celesteela. Going to be exceptionally hard though with rest, and I don't know if Jake has seen this before and if he has an answer to it. Getting the paralysis though, really, really useful for Jake. It would be nice if Trista could just rest. She would be going at it without the Lumberry, which is going to be difficult. You know, you may be asleep for a long time, so not ideal, and Celesteela likely going to be under threat of getting knocked out immediately. It's really up to Trista to get this Porygon doing a little bit more work, I think, especially now it's the only thing moving on her side of the field this turn.
Celesteela switching out. The Salamence coming back in once again. That Intimidate not really helping her out that much. Also, it looks like it switched into a Thunderbolt from that Porygon 2, and we see a second Paralysis onto that Salamence. Unfortunately, we see that Araquanid toxic the Porygon 2 on Trista's side of the field as well, so not really a great turn for her, but she sets up Trick Room, which I think is a very interesting play. I don't know if she was expecting to see that Thunderbolt again from the Porygon 2. I think she was expecting to see a possible Trick Room from it.
I think so, but it's actually worked out in her favor. Of course, getting the Paralysis looks really unlucky for Trista, not ideal. We do see, though, the Trick Room comes in, so now the Celesteela and the Salamence, with their speeds halved this generation, not quartered, is going to be in a better position to actually do something in the Trick Room. Interesting to note, Jake has bought Toxic on his Araquanid, so both these Porygons on a timer to get their things done before the Toxic finally wears them down. It has been tough for this Araquanid to do good damage with the constant Intimidates, though.
We see Araquanid switch out, Muck taking the field in its place, Ice Beam from that Porygon, underspeeding that Salamence, even though it's paralyzed for that knockout. So unfortunately for Salamence, it just wasn't able to capitalize on that unfortunate bit of luck that it had. And a tri-attack from Trista's Porygon into Jake's Porygon. It is barely holding on with that Toxic.
Yeah, I think Jake's Porygon's time is up unless he can get a recover in, which that'll force a move, and that gives Trista some information to make a good prediction on this turn. Of course, Jake showing the Muck here is going to be staring down the Gigalith. We have seen Gigalith using Earthquake. Like, it does have access to ground-type moves, so that might be a solid answer to Muck, especially with the Trick Room up as well. That's going to be in a really good position to capitalize, and I think it could be the answer to really swing this back in Trista's favor.
Definitely. Knowing that she had that Gigalith in the bag, I think setting up the Trick Room when she did makes a lot of sense. You know, sometimes you don't want to be in a position where you have to protect and wait to get the field set up the way you want it. I think the fact that she went for it right off the bat and is now also trying to capitalize on it with that Paralysis might work out in her favor. We see Muck protect on Jake's side of the field, and Gigalith goes for a Earthquake. Unfortunately, that Muck protected, so it won't deal any damage to it, but it should deal enough damage to that Porygon 2 for the knockout. But Porygon holding on with 2 HP, allowing it to use Trick Room to return the Twisted Dimensions back to normal. That Toxic and or that Sandstorm will be enough to knock it out, but it needed to get that Trick Room undone, and that is exactly what it did that turn.
Yeah, Jake's Porygon pulling through, clinging on, just doing what it needed to do as its dying breath. You know, it finally gets to reverse the Trick Room. Now this Celesteela and Gigalith are going to be going last. Interesting to see how Araquanid falls in the speed tier. We know some people making it very Trick Room focused, other people just leaving it around the middle, but this Muck's going to be in a good position. Both Celesteela and Gigalith rely quite heavily on their item, I think it's safe to say. So if he can use Knockoff, which we've seen on Muck so far this year, he's going to be able to not only gather information on something like the Gigalith, maybe take some knockouts as well, and if he doesn't get a knockout perhaps, then he just stops the recovery on Celesteela. So I think Muck now is in a really good position to just really win this game for Jake.
We see Knockoff onto the Gigalith, revealing that it's holding a Assault Vest. I believe that's the second one we've seen on stream this weekend. Liquidation into Gigalith for the knockout. So losing the Assault Vest, definitely a great play by Jake. Celesteela will not be fully paralyzed this turn. It will be able to heavy slam that Muck, and it actually does a decent chunk of damage. Really not the best, but it could be worse.
Yeah, and this was worked out really well for Jake, though. Of course, the Heavy Slam leaves it just above half. The Sandstorm ticks it under half, and it gets the Papa Berry, taking it back to absolutely ridiculous amounts of HP. So Jake's Muck really using that Gluttony ability well, and I do like how Jake has kept the Araquanid around. Knowing that it's not been intimidated now means it is able to do a lot more than it was earlier in the game. So Trista bringing back in the Porygon with the Toxic counter reset, so she has a little bit more time with her Porygon, may be able to reverse the Trick Room, but I'm worried about her offensive pressure alongside it.
Yeah, unfortunately for Trista, she really doesn't have the offensive pressure that she needs to win this game right now, especially when staring down a Muck and a Araquanid. She might have some tricks up her sleeve that'll help her out, but this is only game one. It might be to her advantage to sort of take a step back, maybe regroup, go into game two with a better strategy. But we do see this game go on, knocking off the Eviolite that Porygon 2 is holding. Try attack into the Araquanid. Araquanid firing back with a liquidation, targeting that Porygon 2, hoping for that knockout. And I believe it barely misses it, but thanks to the Toxic and the Sandstorm, we will see that Porygon 2 knock out this term. And unfortunately for Trista, we did see a fully paralysis on her Celesteela.
Yeah, that's not ideal for her at all, But Jake's played this game very, very well. Both players making very smart switches. But I think Trista going into games 2 and 3 just needs to define her strategy a little bit more. She seems a little bit confused if she wants to trick room, if she's trying to set things up. I think she just needs to make that call. She now knows what Jake is doing. She's seen, obviously, Muck and Araquanid. Those are the damage dealers, and I think she needs to bring a very strong answer to those going into game 2. And I think if she defines her strategy a little bit more, while we see the Muck just go for the final attack, so going to give it to Araquanid to round out this game. So a nice little prize for sticking around, Araquanid.
Yeah, I think Araquanid is sort of a fan favorite at this point. It's a very powerful water spider. I think we all love it. So having it get that last move of the game, maybe it'll give it a little bit of an ego boost going into game 2. We'll have to see.
I think something to take out of that matchup as well. We've been talking as well about how the meta has shaped up over the past few weeks. And something I'm very interested in is, you said at the beginning, Trista's team is something a little bit older, Jake's a little bit newer, and I think that game definitely shows why that team has come to prominence. Araquanid and Muck weren't looked at early in the season. It just took a couple of good finishes from them, a couple of pickups from big names. Now those two Pokemon are pretty much something everyone can look at as a team-building resource.
Yeah, and it's definitely something you also need to have a counter for, and I don't think Trista brought those counters into Game 1 with her. We saw the Gigalith, but unfortunately it just wasn't able to attack that Araquanid, knocking it out before it had the opportunity to possibly, help counter that Muck. But overall, her team just seems to lack a really good way to deal with just the synergy between Araquanid, Muck, and honestly, a little bit of that Kartana as well.
No, I definitely feel like her team, it tries to play its own game. It doesn't really bring an answer, unfortunately, to Jake's team. So he's going to be in a very good position, feeling quite confident, I think, going into that game. I don't think he made many misplays. Everything he played was quite safe, quite smart, and the onus is definitely on Trista to define what she wants to do and not decide halfway through a game. Go into the game with a clear, concise strategy, execute that strategy as best you can, obviously adapt on the fly. That's the sign of a top player, which Trista is. She has the pedigree to adapt and come back from this deficit in a best 2 out of 3.
Definitely. Well, we are getting started here with Game 2 of this Round 8 Swiss match. Trista leading with that Celesteela and Porygon on her team, so not an offensive lead at all. Jake, mixing it up a little bit, getting that Porygon 2 back out on the field, but this time pairing it with that Muck.
Now, the Muck is going to be huge here. Muck's knockoff, obviously getting a good amount of damage done with the Dark typing, getting the same type attack bonus due to the new Alolan form, is going to be fantastic. And both the Pokemon on the field on Trista's side really rely on their item. We've seen a lot of people pick up Muck to knock off the Eviolite, and then it's so much easier to knock out. It's unbelievable. Obviously, if you can knock off the usual leftovers on Celesteela, in this case the Lumberry, then you're going to limit her access to rest. It's going to be a lot harder for her to win the game. So I really like that. And obviously Jake's Porygon doesn't seem under too much pressure. It might get toxic again, but it's in good shape.
We do see the Toxic miss the Porygon 2 on Jake's side of the field. Porygon 2 on Trista's side of the field, using that Tri-Attack to target it as well. Porygon 2 with a Thunderbolt into the Celesteela, and that Muck immediately knocking off the Eviolite from that Porygon 2.
Yeah, that Porygon 2 is going to be a lot easier for Jake to handle now. We did see in game 1 he had to kind of wear it down with Toxic. That was his pressure on it, forced her to switch it in and out. But now without the Eviolite, a lot of attacks bring it into range to get knocked out, because it is, of course, a not fully evolved Pokemon. So it's, the way it's kind of naturally talented isn't as strong in the slightest. If this turn he can maybe get rid of the Lumberry on Celesteela, both her Pokemon are going in without items through the rest of the game. And if you imagine starting a game with no items, that's kind of the situation she's looking at here.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that that Toxic missed as well. We see Muck go for a second knockoff into the Celesteela, removing its Lumberry. Celesteela going for rest anyways. Unfortunately, it will be unable to wake up for 2 turns. So that Celesteela is just dead weight essentially on the field until it wakes up. Porygon 2 going for a second try attack, this time into the muck. Porygon 2 on Jake's side of the field, targeting Thunderbolt into the Celesteela.
No, unfortunate from Trista. I don't really know her thought pattern there, and I think a bit of an overplay. But she did know the Muck had knockoff. She knew Muck would be moving before Celesteela. That was definitely something she was aware of. So it was a very brave move to go for the rest, maybe thinking Muck would try and get rid of Porygon. But unfortunately, trying to rest without the Lumberry, which she knew could get knocked off, is a big misplay, and maybe the fatigue just getting to her a little bit.
We see that Celesteela switch out and Gigalith take the field in its place, bringing that Sandstorm with it. We see Poison Jab from Muck into the Porygon 2, not going to deal a lot of damage, does not poison it either. Thunderbolt into the Gigalith, not dealing any damage, and Porygon 2 on Trista's side of the field setting up Trick Room.
Yeah, something she's going to need. If she's got the Gigalith in, then Trick Room is something she needs and finds a good turn to set it up. So she's not down any Pokemon. She's down a couple of items, unfortunately, but she's going to be able to do something with Gigalith. It can put pressure on Muck, and we've seen Muck taking that chip damage over the turns, putting it in a kind of low health range. So as long as Muck can get knocked out cleanly from here without triggering the Ipapa Berry, then it's going to be a big comeback mechanic for Trista. With Gigalith in under Trick Room, I think she may have the way to sneak back in.
She definitely needs to get some knockouts this turn. Instead, we see a Rock Slide into the Muck and the Porygon 2. Again, activating that Aya-Papa Berry on Muck thanks to its Gluttony ability, restoring almost all of its health. And we see Porygon 2 on her side of the field used Recover as well, so possibly hoping that Jake might get a flinch or two this turn to allow her to sort of regroup and re-strategize. Unfortunately, though, we see Muck target that Porygon 2 with the Poison Jab, does get the poison, but Porygon 2 on Jake's side of the field is the last to move, and it flinches, which means it was trying to reverse the Trick Room, and it did not get it.
Very interesting kind of play there. Trista could have gone for the big damage on the Muck. Obviously didn't want to do that because Rock Slide does get the same type attack bonus, but she does trigger the Aya-Papa Berry, so Muck really healthy again, actually, ending up with more health than it started with. Lucky to get the flinch on Porygon. That definitely helped, I think, with Trista. Probably what she was looking for with the Rock Slide. But Muck getting a little luck of its own, well, 2 bouts of luck. Not flinching and getting that poison on Porygon. So another way, not the toxic poison that builds up, though, but it's still going to be residual damage on that Porygon every turn.
Yeah, we see a second Rock Slide from that Gigalith into the Porygon 2 and the Muck. And again, we see a recover from that Porygon 2. So Trista making the exact same play as she did before. We see Muck again go for the Poison Jab into the Porygon 2. It does not deal enough to knock out, and it is already poisoned, but unfortunately for Trista, this time Trick Room will succeed, and the Twisted Dimensions will return to normal.
Yeah, and that's really, really bad for her, I think. She really wanted to keep that up because that's what she needed to get Gigalith going. Now Gigalith is going last. It doesn't have the chance to hit those Rock Slide flinches, and she's going to be taking damage before she's able to recover, so it looks like Porygon's definitely on the way out. It'd be interesting to see how the Porygons match up. Without the Eviolite, Jake's Porygon may be able to move first and actually get some damage down, but could be interesting in that regard. But Muck, now the fastest thing on the field, may be able to just get the knockoff down on Gigalith and leave her with just one item on her whole team.
Yeah, I think if I were in Jake's shoes, you know, looking at Trista's team, we know she has the Asleep Celesteela in the back. His play right now should be trying to limit her damage potential, and that Celesteela will not be dealing any damage for at least 2 turns. So knocking off that Assault Vest on the Gigalith once again is definitely his way to sort of make sure things stay in his favor. We see Trista switch out the Porygon 2, sending in her Salamence in its place, intimidating that Muck, who goes for a Poison Jab into the Salamence, and it gets a second poison, unfortunately for Trista. This is just not her lucky match. We see Porygon 2 with the Ice Beam also into Salamence, scoring that knockout, leaving Gigalith free to attack, but costing her Salamence, which Gigalith uses this opportunity to finally use that Earthquake. It's going to deal enough damage for the knockout on Muck, and provided there is at least one more turn of Sandstorm here out on the field, which there is, we should see that Porygon 2 get knocked out as well.
So at the cost of her Salamence, Trista does get 2 knockouts in one turn. A brilliant turn for her, but if she really wants to keep on going, Gigalith is probably going to need a little bit of help from its friends. Porygon, a very difficult time to do it with how low it is. Without the Trick Room, not able to recover. It wants to do everything. It wants to recover, wants to Trick Room, it wants to get a bit of damage down. It can't do it all in 1 or 2 turns. So I feel the pressure's still on Trista a little bit, but that's what she needs to get back in the game. Unfortunately, Jake bringing some very offensive Pokemon, and without the Trick Room up, he's going to be able to be moving first and putting down ridiculous amounts of damage.
Yeah, I can understand why Trista was concerned about the potential for the knockoff onto Gigalith, but I don't think that would have knocked it out no matter what. I feel like she should have almost switched in her Celesteela there. She may have still lost it, but she wouldn't have been left in this situation where she really only has one more attacker on the field. That Gigalith needs to stick around, it needs to be dealing damage, but it is so slow. And the fact that Trick Room is not up, and there's that Araquanid just staring it down on the opposite side of the field. I really don't know how she's going to pull this one off.
Yeah, without the Eviolite, Porygon 2 is able to get knocked out by pretty much any attack coming from Jake's side of the field. So he's going to start off the turn with a Dragon Pulse.
And that should knock it out, especially without that Eviolite. Porygon 2 going down and Araquanid moving before the Gigalith with that liquidation. It's going to deal a ton of damage, and it gets the knockout. Unfortunately for Trista, it is just her Sleeping Celesteela versus the Salamence and Araquanid combo. It does not look that good.
No, I think here Jake's really shown the Araquanid and why it's come to the forefront of the metagame now. It's really been a problem for Trista. She's not had the answer to it, and I think as well, her tech in the rest Celesteela has been kind of rumbled. It showed it in game 1, then Jake just bought the answer in the lead. In Muck, you knock off the Lumberry and it can't really rest, so very, very smart play there from Jake. I love his team, actually. I love how it's come together. I love how it's reflective of how the game is right now, and Trista's going to really need a big win in the last round to keep her hopes alive for top cut. She's not out, but she's still clinging on to it. Jake, on the other hand, showing why he's one of those top players, bouncing back from his earlier losses, putting himself back, or keeping himself rather, in contention for top cut. I thought that was a brilliant match. Both players under the pressure. Jake just handled it a little bit better, if you ask me.
Yeah, I have to agree, but I also think he sort of benefited from having the better matchup on paper, and sometimes that is what Pokemon comes down to. You know, unfortunately, when building a team, you can't account for everything.
No, it's really difficult. In this game, it's sort of broken up. A lot happens before the event, you know, the testing that you make, the decisions you make in team building, that's important. Obviously, then you get to the tournament, then you have to make that decision in team preview, and then when you get to the game, you have to try and win the game with the 4 Pokemon you've bought and the 2 you lead with. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not all about that game. There's a big build-up, and I think Jake's build-up and his preparation just a little bit more than Trista's.
We'll have to ask him, you know, just to be sure.
Well, we'll ask him in the player interview we've got coming up in a few minutes.
Yeah, so stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm here with Jake Muller, who just won his round 8 Swiss match. You feeling a little nervous there, sitting on the X2 bubble?
Yeah, a little bit. Trista's a great player, so I didn't really want to have to face her like 5-2, but I did get paired up, so she was 6-1 and I was 5-2, so that's good. That helps me out, but I don't know. You never really want to play Trista, especially this deep in a tournament when it matters a lot. So
Yeah, how has your day been going outside of this match?
pretty good. I like the way the team's playing. I think I'm playing all right. I have lost twice. One of them I just got beat pretty bad. One of them I got a little unlucky, but it happens.
It happens, and usually it balances out in the long term.
Right.
So,
I like it in that match.
so tell me about this team. What were your thoughts when you decided to bring it with you to this tournament?
So the first three I wanted to bring were the Tapu Koko, the Muck, and the Kartana. I've been kind of like using a lot of stuff, kind of all like, I don't know, just like picking whatever I wanted and just testing a bunch of stuff out because this is my first tournament of the format. And so I like those three a lot, and I think they worked really well together, and then I just kind of went from there.
Nice. So then, did you notice the synergy between Muck and Araquanid at all? Because the way those two worked together in that match was fantastic.
Yeah, a lot of times the two of them can like pick up knockouts together that they can't get on their own. So like in game one, after I got to reverse the Trick Room, I just clicked knockoff and liquidation 3 turns in a row and knocked out 3 things. And so they're both like really strong. Muck has a lot of utility with the knockoff as well. And the Araquanid is just kind of crazy strong. The liquidation does so much damage to everything.
So going into team preview for this matchup, what were you thinking?
I saw the Gigalith, and I knew she would want to get Trick Room up because Gigalith is slower than everything on my team. And I knew that if I could keep Trick Room away, then I'd probably have a better chance. So like she set it up both games, and I was able to reverse it both games. So that was mostly what I wanted to do.
Were there ever any moments, though, where you were just like feeling a little nervous, maybe not sure about your reads, maybe regretted tapping the buttons that you tapped?
Right. The beginning of both games was kind of hard just because like I know that the leads in this matchup were kind of, they weren't like super important, but they could put you in like either a decent or like a not so great position, and then you can just kind of maneuver from there because neither of these teams are going to be like knocking out stuff really quick. So once the game kind of got rolling, I was more okay, but just kind of going into the games was a little bit tough.
I can imagine. So what are you thinking moving forward? Are you just trying to keep your head clear and hope for the best? Or?
Yeah, one more round. If I win, I have a chance at making cuts, so that's the goal.
All right, well, we're definitely rooting for you. Best of luck.
Thank you.
We'll be back shortly with our final round of Swiss here in Dallas. Please stay tuned.